Welcome to today's session. We are going to talk about building a view. Okay. So, best practices, what to think about when you build a view or make adjustments to a view, whatever you want to do to either a new view or an existing view. Um, some of you folks may not have the ability to build a new view from scratch. Not a big deal. You can take an existing view and do whatever you want with it. If you did not know that, you can, and then you can save it as your own personal view. So, there's some things that you can do there, to make that particular global view that you have access to. You can then go ahead and make that your own. Give it your own spin. Put in the appropriate dimensions and measures, and you're off and running. So let's talk about some of the building blocks of a view. I'm going to right click and select new view. So I'm able to do that. Some of you folks will not be able to do that, but that's okay. I'm going to show you a couple of things today. So building a new view from scratch, here's a new view. I'm going to minimize my left frame menu there. And there you have it. I've got an empty view, right? It's a clean slate. So how do we build a new view? First things first, what are the components of a view? And well, what is a view? A view, basically think of a view as an online report with rows and columns, similar to Excel. And the building blocks would be a dimension, a level of summary, which is what we call a dimension or a hierarchy, and a measure. And that's it. The measure could be calculated, of course, but typically you would analyze stored measures. So how do we get these components into the view? I like to use the View Explorer. There's a little toggle button here that you can toggle it on and off. The View Explorer allows me to place things where I want them. Like, for instance, I can highlight my rows there, right click it, and select Edit. And that takes me to the list of views that are available within my environment. And the list might be vast. So, obviously, it's something that you could put in some customer, some other keywords there. So type in whatever keyword that you're looking for within the dimension name, and then you can click on or hit return, and it will return all the dimensions with the customer keyword in it. And that way I can find my customer related dimensions much easier. So if I want to, for instance, if I want sold to, I double click it and it becomes available down in my selectable area within my edit rows menu, right? So if I put in product, it'll show me all the product related dimensions as well. So I can select those. Region or territory is something that tells me where the sales are occurring. So I can select those as well. So I've got about, 4 different dimensions. I click OK. They now are visible within my View Explorer. So I was able to add my dimensions pretty easily, right? And then if I go to my measure items folder and right click and add a regular measure or add a calculator, there's nothing really to calculate yet. So let's go out and grab some regular measures. And that brings up my measure menu. And then I can do the same game here, right? If I go in and type in sales, if I'm looking for a sales measure, I can select more than one if I control left click. And I can select multiple. And that way I can bring them in all at once. So as you can see, within a new view, by default, your view, the measure is attached to a time range. So in this case, if I wanted to build in a time range for to the day, or I can do months. Days is interesting if you're storing your data daily. That's a good thing to use. You can then select the year from the year and the 2-year. And I can select current year, or I can put in the absolute year, depending on what you want to do. If I use the base current year, it stays current. So as we move through the years, the view will then move with me, so I don't have to make the adjustments. So that's nice. That's something that I recommend doing if that's your intent. For instance, if I want to build a year-to-date sales view, which is kind of what I'm doing, using days, and that'll allow me to get down to the most current day, such as like today. I believe we have a thing called today. Yep, there it is. So I can add that in very quickly. Boom, I click on add, and those get added in the background, as you can see. If I go into last year and add those, boom, I have those, and now I'm going to exit, and we'll go ahead and click OK. And I should have a pretty nifty looking report already. So as you can see, pretty quick to build, right? So my most current day is September the 15th. As you can see, my most current year is 2017. We'll pretend we're in 2017. That's my current year. And if I look at sales and sales units for last year, we can see that it's all the way up to the 15th as well. So this is a really good indication of year-to-date sales. I should be able to get a nice variance calculation off of that, so that I can, understand growth or decline for that matter. You can move these if I drag and drop my sales amounts together. So now I've got this year and last year's sales amount and this year and last year's sales units. So you can drag and drop these around. I can do those here within the data grid, or I can also do that within the View Explorer. I can drag and drop things around here as well. Okay, so now I've got my sold to. I can then do my drilling. I've got my measures in here, and as I drill, for instance, down for Wilder Foods, I can then drill to my product brand, as you can see, because I've added those levels into my view. If these are drag and droppable as well, maybe if I wanted region as my next drill down, then I can drag and drop that over as well. So it's very flexible. Up here in my navigational area, I can move things around. I can delete them or bring them back in. If I delete product brand out of the view, it's no big deal. I can always bring that back in by clicking on the plus sign there and selecting product brand back into the view. So that's yet another way of bringing a dimension into the view. And as I drill as I keep drilling all the way to the product level, and then I can see all the detail for this particular sold to. Now going back, if I click back on that Wilder Foods, that's what I initially drilled on, and it takes me back to sold to, where I can then delve into another sold to if I wanted to drill in on another account. And I can see how Midwest Providers is doing versus another sold to. Again, clicking back, it then takes me back to that level, sold to. So it's almost like a toggle. If I click in, click back, it just toggles. If I just keep on clicking on that 150, 100, it just takes me down a level, and then it's going to bring me back up a level because I'm just clicking on that as a toggle. And that's a drill. That's drilling down and drilling back up. If I want to change my time frame at all, I can always double click on that first column header, and it will then ask me to change the time frame for that particular column. For instance, this is all the January to today. So I can actually change all of them by switching them and selecting them as needed here. So by selecting all of them, you can see all of them have the January 1 through today in common. They don't have the years in common because some of them are this year and some of them are last year. But I can change January to, for instance, January the 31st, maybe if I want to see how we did for the month of January. Or I can change my time unit to months, where I can just simply work with calendar months as opposed to days. And so now I'm looking at just January. I click on update, and now I'm looking at just January this year versus last. So again, double clicking on that first column header allows me to change these things rather quickly. I can also just change the one column. If I wanted to change that to whatever I want, yeah, I could do that too. So it's very flexible in terms of what you can do with each column. If I wanted to add in a calculation, by the way, the next session is going to deal with calculations, so I won't go too far into them. But Certainly you can add a calculation into your view by right-clicking and adding in a calculated measure. If I do that, it then brings up the calculated measure window, and then I can perform my calculation as needed. If I highlight my measure items, if I click that and expand that folder, it then shows me all the measures within my view that I've added in. So for instance, if I want to do a quick variance this year versus last, I can just highlight the appropriate measures, do the necessary math over here, and while I'm here, I can go ahead and give it a different display mask that makes sense. Of course, it's going to be money, and this is going to be var dollar, which is my column header. And there you have it. So I've got then the variance column for this year and last year's sales. Pretty simple. Let's right click and add in a variance, yet another calculated measure. And this time we're going to use our Stratum functions because I want to do some division here. I want to take that variance and I want to divide it by last year's sales so I can see basically a variance percent. So I'm going to do a divide with zero check function because that will avoid any divide by zero errors. And then I'm going to pick my numerator and my denominator. My numerator is going to be the variance column, and my denominator will be last year's sales. The format's going to be percentage, and my variance, my column header is going to say variance percent. And there you have it. So now I've got a variance percent and I've got a variance column. I can right click that variance percent, do a sort on it in descending fashion, and I see my top growing accounts for the month of January. Right. So, and then as you can see, we can see all the accounts kind of dipping down below zero. So that these are obviously accounts that are contracting as opposed to growing. So by being able to add in those calculations, it makes a big deal, right? It allows you to take the view to another level. I can also add a conditional format to that. If I right click that column header and go to properties, this will be recorded, by the way, folks. So if you want to revisit this, it'll be published later today. But checking the properties on any column allows you to add in a conditional format. In this case, I want to add in a format that shows negative in red, something simple. So I can select that, click OK, and then obviously all my negatives figures then show up in red. And overall, down on the bottom here, I can see the grand total, and we're not doing as well as we did last year in terms of January. Okay. Now, how do I save this? We made some really good strides here. I've got a very nice looking year to date this year versus last view. One thing I want to do now is go ahead and save it away. Well, there's a save as button. That's always good. And then I can name this sales year to date versus last year to date. And, give it whatever description that you want to give it. And then you can also make it either shared or personal. If you are an administrator, you can make it global and share it with the entire community. Many of you probably may not be a security or a view administrator. So then if you do want to share it with the community, you can always save it as a shared view so that other folks can actually see it and use it, right? Down below is where I want to save it to. So if you have a specific area that you want to save it, then you can highlight the area that you want it. These are the view groups that will show up on the left frame menu so that when you want to come back to it, you'll be able to find it. So I'll go ahead and save that. I can also star it up here, and then that'll show up in my favorite area as well. So there's my most recent view there. I just ran it again. Now I'm going to star it. So by starring it, it shows up in multiple places. Obviously, I just ran it, so it's right there. In my favorites, it's right there because I just started it. And then for all, it should be under my favorites, under the sales over year to date versus last year. I did save it to my favorites, I believe. That should be there. Maybe I need to refresh. There it is. So yeah, refresh might be in order there. So by refreshing your browser session, it'll then show up and it'll be available too. So again, there's actually 3 spots that I'm able to get at it from the actual view group itself that I saved it to under favorites. That's called the view group. My recents, obviously I just ran it. So the recents will always keep track of what you run historically. And then I start it, so it's going to show under up here as well. And again, I'm going to get the same results no matter where I click on it. It's the same view. Okay. Now I'm going to flip this on the head a little bit. I'm going to use time as a dimension. So now I'm going to say, well, I'd really like to see this as a trend. You know, I can build out, you know, more columns here. Here's just January. I'd like to see how February is doing, March, April, and so on and so forth. Now, certainly I could add in another column here and make that February, add in yet another column, make that March. Absolutely. That's one way to build a trended view. That would be pretty easy to do. The problem with that, it would take some time. You know, I have to add in each regular measure, you know, for sales, for instance. If I wanted to put in just for the month of February, you know, I have to go here and go through all this rigmarole to put in my month of February, right? And then, you know, I would do the same thing then for March. I would then say, oh, and add one in for March, and so on and so forth, right? I would then have to reorder it. Wouldn't be too bad, but, you know, I can then keep building out my trend for my year for 2017 there, right? And I could just keep adding in columns as needed. Well, just so you know, there's an easier way. There's a better way to build trend style looking reports, and that would be to use time as instead of time as a range. We're going to release it and make it available as a dimension. So then we can build views and use time and just naturally aggregate the data across my years and my months and my days, you know, depending on what dimension I use. So how do we do that? Well, again, I could use this view. Oops, I ran something. I can use this view, and I can rebuild it, right? So I'm going to actually show you that because you would have to do this either way, either within a new view or an existing view. You would have to actually turn off a mode, and it's attached to the properties under measure items. So if you bring up your View Explorer, I'll right click that measure items folder, and I'll select, and I'm going to turn off the time range. Basically, I'm going to say I don't want time range any longer, and I'm going to click OK to that. And you know, you get a warning saying, okay, well then you need to reselect your measures, because right now your measures are actually tied to those time ranges. So I said, okay, that's not a problem. Obviously, I'll go ahead and reselect those. But before I do that, I'm going to put some time dimensions into my columns. And I'm going to select year months. And, you know, there's another one called year-based, month-based. And I'll show you why I selected those. I'm going to select one more called months. And I'll show you why I select these. So I'm going to click OK to that. And I'm going to go ahead and I have to also add back in a measure or 2 or 3 or whatever I want. So I'm going to right click my measure items, add regular measure. And again, I'm just going to add in my sales units for now. So there's my sales units, add that in, and we're ready to go. So if I click OK, I see my years now across my columns. Isn't that interesting? And then I've got a not map. So this is the leftover stuff that's not mapped to a year, just some basically just some dirty data that we've got in our demo that needs to be cleaned up. So I can filter the years just like I can filter a customer or an item. So if you want to pare down the years that you just want to see within your view, you can do that. So now I've got a nifty looking view here with just current year and last year aggregated at the yearly level. I can sort the year. So maybe I want to see the most current year first. I can flip that and I can see last year first. So it's up to you. But as you can see, I can filter and sort on year so that I can only see what I want in the order that I want. What happens if I drill in on 2017? I get to see the months. How cool is that? So now that's one way to build that view. Here's a trend style view for current year to date. All my months, and this will just keep, as we move into October will just automatically pop up because it'll start transacting records. It'll start storing records. You'll start invoicing in your most current month, and we'll trap that. We'll get that from your ERP, and voila, October shows up automatically. So no need to add that in, right? So a nifty way to do that, right? Now, one thing, I can even put in days here. I know that I've got data stored at the daily level, and I know I have a dimension called day or days, and I can add that into the mix, right? So now I'm adding my days into the mix. So if I want to see how January looks at a daily level, check that out. Now I could draw from January to the days within January, so I could see how the month of January trended out for all my customers. Cool. Yeah, I can come back up, drill back into another month. How did February look? How cool is that? That's the power of the time dimensions. You get to aggregate all the way back up to the year, and I can go into 16 and I can play the same games. It's very, very nifty. So time is a dimension. It's very flexible. Allows you to build these trend style reports much quicker, right? I don't have to bring in column after column after column. If I wanted to do a daily trend, forget about it. You're not going to want to do that. So use time as a dimension, and you'll save yourself some time, and you'll work faster and smarter, right? If I were to build these for instance, if I were to build a view for a connector, maybe I'm building a view for Power BI or for Excel. We have connectors that you can tap right into these views and bring those down. Well, you might build those a little bit differently. For instance, I've got a view here that I use for my Power BI reports. And so as I run that, you can see that I've got all my dimensions, and they're drilled all the way into the detail, because that's what I want to see in my connector report. I want to have these dimensions available within my connector report as a data set. So if I go into my connector report, I can see that this should match these different fields that are available should match what's in my view that I just ran. It's the same view. Now I'm looking at it using Power BI, and I've got all the same measures available to me and all the same levels that are within the view. Power BI comparative sales, Power BI comparative sales. So this is the same view that I'm tapping into. Now let's take another look at this view. Totals are turned off, so there's no subtotaling, right? That's one thing you'll notice, because you don't want that in your data set. So you're going to build a Power BI view that you want to tap into a little differently. You're going to turn totals off so you don't have redundant records of totals in your data set. And another thing you're going to do is build static column headers. As you can see, none of these will change because they've been overwritten. So instead of having the time range columns there, because those will change, we want to make sure that the column header stays static so that Power BI doesn't break. Because if they do change, this data set will then break, and I won't be able to use it any longer unless I fix it. Okay, so view building best practices for the connectors are turn off your totals, drill all the way to the detail that you need to, static headers, right? And one other recommendation, not too much detail. If I were to put orders or invoice into that view, it's going to make my row count much larger than 955. It's going to be 100,000, 200,000, 500,000. And it's going to make the report run, or if I bring that into Power BI as a refresh, it'll take some time. So you need to make the call as to how much detail you want to provide into that view. And don't worry, you can always drill back to the detail. As you can see, we have a drill to detail button here in the Power BI report. So I can actually drill to detail by using that button. It will then take me to a view that has the necessary detail in it to satisfy my analytical needs. Because you don't want all that detail. And here I can bring in, now I'm in the view and I can bring in order, invoice, whatever I want to see, whatever type of invoice level detail I want to see, I can bring that in. And I don't even think we have invoice in here. Or order number. I don't think we have that type of detail. Nevertheless, you probably will. And you can bring that into your view. And as you can see, by drilling to this view from the Power BI report, I had the Patrick Hurley selected when I did the drill down. So as you can see, it filters on Patrick Hurley's numbers. And then I can drill all the way to the product level to see what products Patrick's are selling. These are all the products Patrick is selling. There's a lot of detail. I wouldn't put this in a dashboard, So being able to do that type of analysis is pivotal, because that way I don't have to bring all that into this particular view. If I select Nicole and I do play the same game, I click on the drill down. So from the Power BI's perspective, I only get so much detail, right? The Power BI gives me more summary to medium level, detail. If I want to see Nicole's product related, I could see Farm Fresh up here, First Choice is some of her top brands. She's struggling a little bit because her this year numbers are lower than last year. So I'm able to glean some information from this Power BI report. But if I were to drill to her detail and play the same game that we just played with Patrick, let's see what Nicole's numbers look like. And right away I see a problem, right? She's got a sales decline issue here. So again, I can play the same game here and go to her products and see which products that she's struggling with. And it looks like she's struggling with most of the product offerings. Here we see some growth, but man, it looks pretty dire. And then I can even go to her customers and I can see that her customer, it's really one customer that she's got a problem with, and there's no sales this year for an account. So we need to figure out what's going on there, right? So by drilling to this detail, I wouldn't really know all this detail. I wouldn't have access to the accounts, and it wouldn't be as easy to get to that detail. By including that all here, it wouldn't be as presentable, for that matter. I mean, this looks good. If I start bringing in all this other detail, well then, it's going to clutter my report. That defeats the purpose of my dashboarding report, right? Or any other type of graphical report. There's too much, a fine line between too much and too little. So again, if you're building these views for using with your connectors, make it more like a flat file. You want to drill into all your detail, turn your totals off. Don't include too much detail, because you can always drill back to that view. And you can always drill to those detail hierarchies when you're back in the view, not within the Power BI interface. Because trust me, it'll save you some frustration, and it'll run a lot better too. So